This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're on the road in Chicago on our 100-city tour. I'm Amy Goodman. The new Chicago teachers contract could allow Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel to solidify his main reform objective of lengthening what had been one of the nation's shortest school days and years. He spoke about this on Tuesday.
Our elementary students will gain an extra hour and 15 minutes every day and 2 additional weeks every year. Our high school students will be in front of a great teacher for an extra 30 minutes, just like here at Walter Payton, each day, and 2 additional weeks each year. For the 6,000 and plus students who are entering kindergarten, the additional kindergarten students we put in, they will have an extra 2.5 years in classroom by the time they graduate high school. That 2.5 years of additional education is a new day and a new direction for Chicago's children and Chicago's schools.
That was Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff of President Obama. Karen Lewis, our guest, the president of the Chicago Teachers Union, just after the vote for suspending the teacher strike, the first teacher strike called in a quarter of a century. Your response to what Rahm Emanuel considers his greatest achievement, the lengthening of the school day?
Well, I mean, that was his mantra from the very beginning. I think it's interesting that when he first started out, he claimed that students would have 4 extra years because, you know, of this horrible, horrible short school day. Now it's down to 2.5 years. You know, we know that quantity is not quality, and from the very beginning, we didn't actually fight him on this longer school day because the law gave him the opportunity to impose it, but we wanted to make sure it was a better school day. And a better school day for us included a broad, rich curriculum for our students. We were concerned that the direction of school reform is about standardized testing, so it's about math and reading all day, which doesn't engage children. So we wanted to make sure they had art, music, PE, world languages. These are the kinds of things that also stimulate critical thinking. And we wanted to also bring the joy of teaching and learning back into the classroom.
I was speaking to some people last night who were pointing out that Rahm Emanuel's own children go to the lab school, as did President Obama's. Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education, also went there himself. What are the standards of the lab school when it comes to number of teachers per the ratio of kids to teachers, the length of the school day?
Well, I'm not really sure about the ratio. I know it's a lot smaller than the one we have because it's a private school. By the University of Chicago.
However,
I also know that the lab school has 9 art teachers and quite a few music teachers and a real commitment to a rich, broad curriculum. As a matter of fact, when we heard that the mayor was sending his children to the lab school, we went on the lab school's website, pulled down what their educational program looked like, and we said from the very beginning, we're glad that Rahm Emanuel knows what a good education looks like, so we're going to make sure that every child in Chicago has that opportunity too.
The role of the Democratic Party, I mean, you're a union. Unions traditionally support the Democratic Party, but wasn't it the Romney-Ryan ticket, Congressman Ryan applauding Mayor Rahm Emanuel and what he was trying to do in this?
Right. Well, the school reform issue is an issue of billionaire elites by and large, and it's very nonpartisan. So it's no surprise that the Romney-Ryan ticket would support any anti-union, beef that the mayor has. I mean, so if other people that ran for mayor were actually told, oh, so are you going to crush the unions? That's part of your in for a dollar, in for a dime with us. So, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. But politically, I really wasn't thinking about that, and none of us were. We were just trying to build some unity in our union, which had been extremely fractured and kind of moribund for a while. And what we wanted to do was to empower our rank and file teachers so that the real work of the union is in the buildings, not in an office downtown. We wanted to go from a service model to an organizing model so that people that are feeling empowered can also do what's best for children.
What about President Obama? He comes from here. Where was the Democratic Party? Where was the president in showing support, expressing support? You had the Republican ticket supporting Rahm Emanuel. What about the Democratic ticket and the President of the United States?
I don't know. I mean, nobody contacted us, so I'm not. I mean, again, you know, we weren't looking for a political solution to this, and I think that there are other ways to deal with the political solution, but in terms of this strike and this aggregation of power to the rank and file, I think that's kind of threatening to just about every political institution. So I don't think it really matters.
I want to ask you about a comment made by Bruce Rauner, a wealthy venture capitalist who's helping lead a drive for more charter schools here in Chicago. He's also a close behind-the-scenes advisor to Mayor Rahm Emanuel. On Tuesday, he said, quote, "The critical issue is to separate the union from the teachers. They're not the same thing. The union basically is a bunch of politicians elected to do certain things, get more pay, get more benefits, less work hours, more job security. That's what they're paid to do. They're not about the students. They're not about results. They're not about the taxpayers." Karen Lewis, you're the president of the Chicago Teachers Union. Your response?
I actually know Bruce Rauner. I met him when I first took this job, and he was actually quite impressed with me and invited me to join a board that he was on. He and I also went to the same undergraduate school. And
where did you go to school?
We both went to Dartmouth. I'm a few classes ahead of him, and so we've seen each other a variety of times, and he's always made it clear that he did not believe in unions or any collectivism. I mean, the problem is he has the wrong idea of what this union is. Now, that may be so for other unions, but we purposely try to change the culture of union so that the union is about education, is about empowering teachers and paraprofessionals and clinicians. And as a result, the union officers took pay cuts, significant pay cuts, so that we could have an organizing department, so that we could have a research department, so that we didn't do the union the way the old union was done, because those days are over, because then people like Bruce Rauner can separate the union from the teachers, and this is where they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong, and they acted that way the entire time because they didn't understand what we were really doing, which was organizing our members, not about the whole. Yes, we have to negotiate for whatever, but that's not our main focus. So our main focus is trying to make education better because we feel like we can solve some of the problems. The longer school day was a hot, buttery mess until we sat down with them and said, okay, look, you can't afford to pay us this entire length of day because the arbitrator told you that. So here's a way to figure this out by staffing up so that you can save some money. We actually brought that to the board because they were clueless. They were absolutely clueless in trying to figure out the problem. We're teachers. We're problem solvers. And for Bruce Rauner has to remember, I'm 2 years out of the classroom. So for me, not a bureaucratic union hack. Sorry, that tag just won't hang on us.
Well, let's talk about that. Your background, chemistry teacher at Martin Luther King High here in Chicago. The Caucus of Rank and File Educators. Explain what CORE is and where you came from.
Right. Well, we were sitting around a table, literally 8 of us, reading about the school closings in Chicago and understanding that this was basically a real estate plan, and it still is, by the way, and not an educational plan. So we were trying to figure out how do we actually use our voices to attack that. We did book clubs, literally. We started as a book club. We read Shock Doctrine.
Naomi Klein's book.
Yeah, Naomi Klein's book, which was very helpful to us to kind of put put in perspective what these people were doing and how they amassed this power over the last 30 years. And then all of this started in Chicago at the business school, right? So we started just trying to take off small bites of the apple by going to the school closing hearings, demanding that the Board of Education come to these hearings. They weren't. And again, we have an appointed mayoral control board. They're not accountable to anyone, and they're certainly not accountable to the community. When the community would come and beg for their schools, this is one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my life. Children, teachers, and not so much teachers at first, but parents and community members begged for their schools, and that fell on deaf ears. So people felt completely unempowered that if a decision was made, it was made, and there was nothing you could do about it. Well, in the first year we started this, we got 6 schools taken off the hit list. That had never happened before. We changed the way the Board of Ed did things. The board members actually came to the schools, and we said, you should at least come to the schools you're going to close and look these people in the eye and explain to them why. And that had never happened.
What happens when a school closes? Where do the kids go?
It depends, you know. A lot of times the kids will go to another school, or some just get lost in the shuffle. I mean, none of this stuff had been taken into consideration. They had no plans for closing a school and doing anything appropriately for the children. They had no plans of bringing the faculties of the 2 schools together to have some conversation so there's some continuity of instruction for children. But none of that. And no safety plan. So, you know, Chicago is a pretty dangerous place, as you may have heard, and there absolutely no plan for how are we going to get kids safely through different territories. None of that was ever, and when we bring this up and we beg them, don't do this, it's a mistake. And they just absolutely ignored the community. And this year, there were parents from more affluent communities that got ignored. So, I mean, there was this whole kind of feeling of the Board of Education is completely unaccountable. There's something wrong with this.
Actually, on the issue of accountability, before the vote to suspend the teacher strike, Mayor Emanuel spoke about the need to hold teachers and principals accountable. Let's go to that clip.
I want people to understand this is across whether we're going to make the improvements in our education of our children and create a culture where people are held accountable for the results. And these principals, like the others who signed the letter, are being clear that one of the goals they chose this, they want to be held accountable, they expect to produce results. To do that, they have to be able to also choose the teachers that work in the building, 3rd grade, 5th grade, what class it is. These individuals are trained. Some of them are former teachers, now principals, as in Dr. Hines' case. And it's a key issue about which direction we're going to take and whether we're going to have a school system built for accountability that holds our principals accountable in the school rather than downtown making the choice.
That's Mayor Rahm Emanuel. Karen Lewis, your response.
Well, I mean, the whole accountability movement is a disguise for pushing forth another agenda. Here's the problem with the so-called principal accountability and flexibility. In Chicago, the shelf life of a principal is about 4.5 years. So the question to us is, are we going to just have a lot of churn every 4 years or so? Now, that means that's the average. So we have less than that on some ends. The days when the principal was in the school for a significant period of time, knew families, understood the neighborhood, those days are over. So what they're doing is churning through principals, and then they also want to churn faculty through that too. So there are some schools where you have absolutely no veteran staff and nobody in the middle part of their career, but they are brand new teachers. So 2nd-year teachers are mentoring 1st-year teachers. That is a plan for disaster, quite frankly. So, you know, a lot of the whole, we want to know who's accountable for destroying neighborhoods, who's held accountable for the lack of stability throughout the city that has all of these other implications. So the whole accountability movement is just geared in one direction. So where's the accountability upwards? Who loses their jobs for the hot mess they create for the rest of us?
Finally, have other teachers' unions around the country been calling you?
Absolutely. They've not only been calling us, they've been sending us letters of support. They've been sending us actually money. Local to the United Federation of Teachers in New York City sent us $10,000, for our Solidarity Fund. It's just been amazing. Boston took out an ad refuting Rahm Emanuel's oh, why can't we just settle like Boston did? It was just a really wonderful outpouring of support, not just from the country. Are they
turning to you for what they can do in their cities, like around issues of what's called merit?
We haven't talked about it yet, but I'm sure those conversations are going to get started because I think we have changed the conversation in this country.
And the issue of school reform nationally, and what even that term school reform means. The person who is hailing this is Arne Duncan, from former head of the schools here, now Secretary of Education, the whole race to the top, as they call it.
Yeah, we've never liked it, and we've never liked those programs. We found them to be extraordinarily destabilizing. And also, the idea of the market approach for public education, as far as we're concerned, tramples on democracy. Public schools are the place where you get to learn about democracy, and it's been trampled out. And Chicago has the potential for that. We have local school councils of elected parents and community members and staff who are supposed to choose principals, evaluate principals, look at how the discretionary funds are spent. And the local school councils in schools that are very high functioning, the local school councils are also high functioning. But in the schools that aren't so much, you find those aren't functioning as well, and it's due to a lack of training and will.
And evaluating teachers according to these high-stakes tests?
Well, that is something that the law requires now. So it's not like we had a choice around it, but what we didn't like is that the mayor and CPS decided to pile on and add extra things that were not in the law. So, and that's part of what we see. There's like this whole thing about, oh, I'm tougher on my teachers than you are, like it's some kind of competition amongst the elite to have who's the baddest person in the room. But, my concern about all of this is that we care about kids because that's the work we do, and this mayor has said he cares about students. I would like to hope that he does. I know that he cares about some of them, but 25%, he told me, were never going to be anything, never going to amount to anything, and he wasn't going to waste money on them. So if we decrease wages for everybody across the board, then we see that, and we see those lack of resources coming into play. All of this makes perfect sense when you understand what their calculus really is.
Karen Lewis, you were a stand-up comic. Was there anything funny about the strike or what you see coming?
Well, I find humor in just about everything, to be perfectly honest with you. It's how I get through the day. There have been some funny moments, but by and large, this has been absolutely serious. I think the sea of red and the show of support, there's something to be said when people are bootlegging your T-shirts, You're
talking about the red T-shirts, and
yes.
They're going to wear them back in the schools today.
Oh, yes. We told everybody, walk together, meet each other in the parking lot, and walk together as a union back into the buildings.
Karen Lewis, I want to thank you for being with us. Karen Lewis is president of the Chicago Teachers Union. She led the city's first teacher strike in a quarter of a century and is part of the union's caucus of rank-and-file educators known as CORE. She was a teacher in the Chicago schools, a chemistry teacher at Martin Luther King High School on the south side of Chicago. This is Democracy Now! We'll be back.